All right, so it's first thing in the morning, and it's time to learn about what is wokeism. Wokism. Wokism. From our good friends, the podcast, the Poo Eaters. Let's see what they have to say.
So Wokism is back up. When is it not back up? What am I talking about? Every goddamn day in the West, Wokism has done this.
Yeah, because you guys keep talking about it. You keep bringing it up and labeling it. Everything is woke. That's why it's always around. But yeah, go for it.
Yeah. But the conversation today is about the rightists in the room who are being retarded, because I'm bored of this. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of seeing right-wingers who are like, you want to build trees? That's wokeism. And stop that. Like,
yeah, that's very common. But you guys did not help with this at all. The term woke came from a very specific place and has been adopted and shifted into basically grievance politics. And that's 100% what it is and all it is. And I have a feeling that Callum, the fleshlight here, Sargon's fleshlight fuck puppet, he is his little butt slut. He is, yes. He's absolutely, this is very much like top and bottom energy. Not that Sargon's especially much of a top, you know? Let's be honest, but Callum is just so bottom. Anyway, that's my headcanon. Sticking with it. Everything's alleged. It's going to be one of those, like, we're not as crazy as those other conservatives, but you're just as bad.
Shut up.
Build trees. And it's a Mike Graham growing concrete movement.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. People
we build loads of trees around it.
I mean, basically just normie
conservatives
commentators
who don't know what they're talking about.
There's that, but then
not like us. We're the good ones.
That part of the conversation, but we're mostly going to be focusing on one lady who I believe is in this sphere, has written a whole book about it, but failed to define it on live TV, debating a leftist, which, made her look a bit silly.
I mean, isn't it good that we spent all of 2021 essentially doing the legwork, the hard work of going through their 500-page tome and making hundreds of pages of notes to be able to actually do this for them? Isn't that useful?
If only they had just invited Sargon or one of his proxies of his little twink brigade on, then they could have definitely announced it.
I wish they'd use it. Start off, though, if you want to find out, the Origins of Intersectionality podcast, good place to start, of course.
Here's one of the, probably about a dozen podcasts we've done about this now.
Kimberly Crenshaw's one being the foundations, though, of...
Why does everybody keep using woke? This is why.
The point of, maybe it's not just one group that's the oppressed that needs to become the oppressor. Instead, maybe it's all these groups along all these lines, which never end.
In her defense, when this was like 1991, I think it was, that she started coming to the sort of 89 to 93, that sort of area, this was fairly revolutionary at the time. It's easy to look back.
No, it's bimbo energy thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. It's easy to look back and go, well, duh. But, like, the first person to nail it down is doing something impressive.
But let's move to the thing that caused this, which is conservative-owned, because they couldn't define a thing.
Average conservative.
But also just person? This isn't really like the own the left thinks it is. Like, haha, you can't define something.
You can't define woman.
Yeah.
But, okay, first of all, we're talking about mainstream media. That's not really much of the left. That's liberals. Functionally barely stepping over the line into something resembling, like, actual progressive policies. But I digress. It is a bit of a known when somebody literally writes a book and holds themselves up as a champion of the definition, understanding that definition, being a scholar of wokeism, and then when is asked directly, what does that mean, and they can't answer, that's a pretty good own.
What are the last 2 years of conversation been? But
how many party leaders have to be destroyed by the question?
So this is some verified check mark. As you can see, at 9.2 million views on this clip. This got widely shared amongst left-wing circles, just being like, haha, rightist.
All conservatives BTFO'd.
Yeah. Wow, funniest thing I've seen all day. This MAGA grifter's brain literally short-circuited when she was asked to find woke. She couldn't. Maybe we should help her by reading a book and leaving a review, because she's written a book, as you can see in the background.
Right.
Advertising, that's what the purpose of this interview was. But let's play the interview, I suppose, and we'll have a look at what the footage was.
I love this. It is So great. You can, I don't know if they're going to show the whole thing, but you can see her brain short circuit in real time. It's so awesome.
Of Americans consider themselves very liberal, and probably fewer of them consider themselves to be woke. And so, when we talk about traditional,
what does that mean to you? Would you mind defining woke? Because it's come up a couple times, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So, I mean, woke is sort of the idea that
error.
This is going to be one of those moments that goes viral. I mean, woke is something that's very hard to define, and we've spent an entire chapter defining it.
Oh.
It is sort of the understanding that we need to totally reimagine and redo society in order to create hierarchies of oppression.
What?
Sorry, it's hard to explain in a 15-second soundbite.
Well, yeah, look, your time.
And then she couldn't.
That was terrible.
Yeah, it wasn't a good job.
Yeah.
She does manage to get out of her mouth, which is that it's a new system of oppression hierarchies, which is true.
Well,
then which hierarchies? Because this is true of every socialist ideology.
That's not what they would argue. They would argue that it's a critical lens by which we can identify oppression hierarchies in order to dismantle them.
Correct. That's exactly correct. That's what it is. It's like, and a lot of this is all just a big word salad blob that doesn't mean anything. But what's really fascinating is if you can get one of these guys to honestly interact with you, and you're like, okay, so let's put aside wokeism, let's put aside critical race theory, let's just address the core elements of this critical theory, and you can show them good examples of critical theory at work, they would have to agree with it. They'd be like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. This is why that happened, which led to that. Okay, cool. It's just a type of analysis. That's all it is. The buildup of this being more than that is entirely these guys. That's it. Like, it just applying it to everything to build a conspiracy boogeyman.
But then, which hierarchies are you looking for? Because every socialist has their own view of which hierarchies are bad and the real problem.
Well, yeah.
Or,
I mean,
inequalities and abuse and oppression. It doesn't matter what those hierarchies actually are, what they're labeled. It's that if they exist along those metrics, then they are bad.
I mean,
which ones need to be put in place?
The left-wing socialists, which I'm going to define that way because there are right-wing socialists, would argue that actually all the hierarchies are a problem and they need to be dismantled.
You could see that, but then they just make their own. I mean, if we're actually being not socialists, then you look at what the Soviet Union did, and it's not like they got rid of hierarchies of oppression.
Yeah, but...
see, now Soviet Union and socialism, the big conflation there, too. It's another thing that they do. They make a big mushmash, a blob of words, and they put them all together. Like, if you want to talk about socialist concepts, not even socialism, socialist concepts, which are everywhere and in every country, it is their job to make you equate that with Stalinist, communist Russia, the Soviet Union. That's what they want you to make the correlation to. There are so many steps between those two things, and a whole lot added before you get anywhere near there. But it doesn't matter because that's their job, to confuse, to build up an enemy, and to make you hate it.
But the ethos underneath it is the idea that they will eventually have arrived at a place where there are no hierarchies of oppression. So the
trust me, bro.
Yeah.
No, it's to attempt. It's to progress. That's it.
Very much so. But the intention is that they're trying to demolish hierarchies of oppression through critical analysis, through the lens of intersectionality.
Yeah, that's what they'd say. I don't believe them.
I mean, that's
obvious nonsense. But,
obviously, I don't believe it.
Yeah, of
but
course. What's funny is we've been through this with the 20th century, and then the idea that this is something new, that trust me this time, it's just
that's the goal.
Yeah. We'll go to the next link.
I'm fascinated to try and understand exactly what they mean by all of this. Like okay. One thing that I will give them is if they were to say, which maybe they're implying, it's hard to say because these guys are never very specific. If they're trying to say that by dismantling harmful hierarchies, that new ones might come up into place, put in part by the people that tore down the old ones, in which case they could be just as bad. I agree. Power corrupts. That's just how shit works. It's a human condition. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. That doesn't mean that the actual hierarchies that are in place right now that can hurt people, it doesn't mean that those aren't still bad and they need to be addressed. You know what I mean? You don't want to just be in a position philosophically or politically where you just throw your hands up and be like, oh, well, whatever.
Link here, because apparently she's not a very reliable actor. James Lindsay pointing out that apparently she smeared him as an anti-Semite a couple of years ago.
James Lindsay is a moron. If she smeared James Lindsay, she's at least done one decent thing.
For pointing out obvious things about Wokism.
Really?
Her background, I believe, is like she went to loads of Jewish schools. She doesn't have a Jewish mother; she's got a Jewish father.
Right.
So I think she probably, I'm guessing here, just turned around and said that's anti-Semitic because she wasn't understanding what James was saying.
Did James Lindsay say something like cultural Marxism or something?
Probably something like that.
Right.
That makes people like go
Doesn't mean
squeamish
that's not-
for some reason.
That's not an inaccurate definition of what it is.
No, and the obsession like, oh, that's got to do with Jews is like James doesn't ever talk like that. So I don't believe that.
Okay, this is another big problem. The whole cultural Marxism. I would say probably 80 to 85% of the people that use the term cultural Marxism do not mean it in any type of anti-Semitic way. But there are quite a lot of people that 100% do. And the quickest way that you could find out if they are is if they start bringing up Soros. The George Soros conspiracy thing, you can bring that up and have a conversation if you're very careful and not sound like a weird conspiracy-minded Nazi dude. You can. You totally can. And it's fine if that's something that you want to talk about and you believe in, so long as you're not prescribing to this JQ-style inquest, okay? Because there's a lot of dudes like that. And there's a lot of dudes that talk like that believe that there is this overarching conspiracy by the secret cabal of Jews that are pushing cultural Marxism, funded by Soros, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of those people are just directly adjacent to James Lindsay. And sometimes these guys. And so a passive observer of this can very easily draw that line and be like, you're too close to it, and that makes me feel like you're part of it. If you don't like it, be more picky about the people you associate with. It's as simple as that.
She's true if she said that about him. But we'll go to the next link here, because Matt Walsh very obviously pointed out, was like, let me get this right. The people who can't define woman are trying to dunk on someone for not being able to define a word. Very true. It's not just woman either, is it?
No.
It's a lot of words. But we'll get to our resident leftist, who very accurately defined it previously. Ash Sarkar.
Oh, yeah.
We keep using this clip because you did make a very good video on this. What is woke culture? At which we turned to Ash Sarkar, who was asking, what is woke culture? And then defined it.
I mean, she knows.
Yeah.
What in the fuck is this picture? Did somebody Photoshop themselves in, like, hanging out with some dudes in chains? That's weird. I don't really know what... Okay. The roots of that term are pretty inextricably anti-Semitic. I would agree. But you always have to, like, be careful when you're having conversations like this, especially public conversations where normies might be observing, to being a little bit more forgiving, at least for the aspects of not appearing to be unhinged when you talk about it, because a lot of normies don't understand the broader context of this. It's more important for everyone around unilaterally to see your conversation being directed in a way that is cogent, makes sense, and is still have enough wiggle room that you're like, okay, here's a door for you to slip out of if you're willing to decry this harmful thing, right? So like somebody starts talking about cultural Marxism, and you're like, well, that can be pretty anti-Semitic, and they're like, oh, is everything anti-Semitic? Is it a big thing? Like, no. Like, this is one group of what people are talking about. Now, if you don't agree with that, cool. I am relieved that's great. And then we can specifically talk about it without that component. So how do you feel about it? And you put it on them. And the people that are watching, who are normies and probably don't understand like the broader context of these conspiracy theories, are like, oh, well, you're being reasonable. Okay. Do you agree or not? You point the focus at them. That's how you do it.
Yeah, and I suppose we'll play this clip and enjoy her definition, correctly so.
To answer Ash Sarkar's totally honest question of what is woke culture, we now turn to respected television academic Ash Sarkar from later in that very same podcast.
Woke is accepting that LGBT identities are valid and should be protected under the law.
Based.
That woke culture is an acknowledgement that there are racialized outcomes reproduced through institutions in society, and people
True.
of color
Based.
measurably are treated differently.
True.
What I want at an interpersonal level is understanding, empathy, and solidarity. And at a political level, I want the pursuit of redistributive goals, whether that's power, whether that's wealth, whether that's land, in order to pursue aims of social justice along class, gender, and race lines.
So just as a quick thing here, what Ash Sarkar has given us there is an external definition of woke culture. She's looking at the features of it and saying woke culture is these features. But the problem with definitions like that is that you get a Diogenes who bursts into the room with a plucked chicken saying, behold a man, right? The essential definition is to approach issues through the lens of intersectionality, which I tweeted out, because that...
Okay. So I would agree with most of what she said. This is actually kind of an interesting point for me because... I was not sold on the idea of systemic injustice. Like I could tell that there was something, but I needed something concrete, if that makes sense, in order to really make a good basis for my own belief system. And what did it for me was prison sentencing. And once I got the actual data on that, and I dug and I researched, and I was like, well, shit. There is legit a systemic problem based observably on race. So there is systemic racism. And it's not a requirement for anybody to see that there is systemic racism and then just agree with every single one that's brought up. You can debate these and you can research these if you want. But if there's just one, then that means, by and large, the statement, there is systemic racism, is true. And that's a good basis for people to branch out and analyze these things for themselves. Does it exist at all? Yes. Okay, then it's real. Now, is it something like important that you further investigate and see which ones even more so are more valid? And you can do that, but you also have to ask yourself, like, is that what you need to be spending your time on? That's for you to decide.
That's what woke culture is. And then it manifests in what Ash Sarkar has just given us there.
Yeah, if we're looking at the end results, that's what you're going to end up
Yeah, exactly. So Plato being like, well, it's a featherless biped, isn't it? It's like, no, that is a man. That does describe men, but it's not essentially what a man is.
Sure, but for people who are looking at the end results, what are we looking for here? I
Well,
think
yeah.
it is true.
Yeah,
And
that is true. Yeah, she's not wrong.
just to reiterate,
You know what? I'm gonna give it to these dudes. At least, they're being more reasonable about this than some people are. The problems with using definitions to define things is I don't like it. Sarkar of Narlgorn. Narlgorn. I like it. Let's see. When I was going to court, I saw a black guy sentenced the same way for stealing an ice cream sandwich as a white guy that was going around smashing car windows. It's pretty in your face in the justice system. Yeah. We should describe the Lotus Eaters as infowarts. That's pretty good.
Distribution of land, power, and wealth along class, gender, and race lines.
Yeah.
So, well, okay, that's the end result. It's nice and easy. It's punchy.
Yeah.
You can get that in a 15-second soundbite. Miss, whoever you were who failed.
Bethany
But
Mandel,
we'll get
yeah.
to this here. This is just summation here. The differences, as I tried to put it, between Marxism, National Socialism, and Wokism.
That's great.
And
Oh, this is from Callum. Okay, I want to read this. Marxism, social justice by redistribution of land, power, wealth along class lines. I suppose, sure, yeah, I suppose. It's using the term redistribution for the term of Marxism is a little snaky because the concept of like the class war is largely about, I don't want to say like reclaiming the power for the workers or whatever. It's more like returning the value of your own like labor, your own efforts back to you. And a lot of that would have to be done through things like tax codes and stuff like that. I mean, this is a much more complicated conversation, but the words redistribution through Marxism is it's snaky and it's like a triggering word for people. National Socialism, social justice by the redistribution of land, power, wealth along racial lines. No, that's not at all what National Socialism would be. But if you're talking about Nazism, which is not socialism, if you're talking about actual Nazism and their ethos, that was nothing about social justice. That was entirely about direct and overt power. Wokeism, social justice by the redistribution of land, power, wealth along class, race, and gender. Okay. So they're the real Nazis. Got it. This little fucking fleshlight dude is such a moron.
That's fantastic, actually.
Marxism,
baby
social justice on the
brain.
redistribution of land, power, and wealth along class lines. National Socialism, same thing, along racial lines. Wokeism, we do it on class, race, and gender lines now. As Ashaka correctly pointed out.
It's a pretty neat synthesis, actually, of the two positions.
And this isn't my work either. The thing is,
yes, big brain.
I've mentioned a
My
lot.
work.
No, I got this from Tick, because
Damn it.
Tick does such a
Okay,
fantastic job of actually defining some things here. Because if you go to the next link, you can see just his video on Hitler's socialism. It's like 5 hours long. And you might think it's some... whenever you hear like a 5-hour YouTube video, I usually think of like some, what are they called? Crumb tubers.
Yeah.
Who just
Socialism predates Marxism and has nothing to do with class. Okay. Socialism is a state control of the economy. Sort of. Okay. Were they talking about socialism or socialist? That's why, like in the previous slide. Hang on. I just want to make sure I know. Yeah, talking about socialism as an actual like political framework. Marxism, where workers take control of the economy. Fascism is national states control the economy. National Socialism, racial states control the economy. Again, this is it's the same thing that they always do. They dumb down everything to make their arguments, and it's not cogent. When they tried this about the Soviet Union and China, it resulted in mass starvation. It's a lot. Okay, so I am never going to be an advocate for communism nor for socialism as a direct government philosophy. But socialist concepts and socialist policies, I do support. I wholeheartedly support because they work well. We have them now. We have a bunch of them in the United States, and they work well. And we need more because without them, people suffer like a lot. Like the easiest one right now. We need socialized healthcare. We need it. We absolutely need it. And there is I've never heard one cogent argument why we shouldn't have it. Not one. Every single time somebody's tried to debate or make a good argument for why we shouldn't have it has made no sense to me in any way. It has always been we should just keep doing what we're doing because the alternative is bad. Well, what we are doing now is bad, and it's awful, and it doesn't make any damn sense. Like, it's crazy. The new meta of Chud's defining woke is such an obnoxious and fruitless circle jerk. I know. Woke only means this is a grand conspiracy to tell you that the things that bother me a little bit are actually part of a huge thing and you need to fight against it, which is why you should care that I can't masturbate to the new version of this children's cartoon. That's what it means. That is like what these guys spend their days every day whining about and trying to convince other people to care about. That's what it is.
I think it's whenever you hear like a 5-hour YouTube video, I usually think of like some, what are they called, crumb tubers, who just sit there and go for it. Tick isn't like that. Tick is incredibly well read, used to be a socialist himself, and ended up not going down that route because he realized, hang on a minute, this is all retarded. And so he's got that insight from an internal and external perspective, and the sources just to endlessly go over it.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I've watched like 3, not this. I haven't watched the 5-hour one yet, but I've watched like 2 or 3 of his sort of more 45-minute ones, where he's explaining. Look, the evidence for National Socialism being a form of socialism is just overwhelming, and you are right. He is so.
Except that once the Nazis were in control, they stopped doing any socialist policies. What? What in the world? It's so ridiculous. What?
Dedicated to this particular canard. I'm so glad he exists.
But it also perfectly makes sense. I mean, like, all these different versions of socialism, as he lists, like, if you're a Marxist, you're obsessed with the worker control of the economy because you care about class. And if you're a National Socialist, you're going to end up talking about racial control of the economy and state because you're obsessed with race. I mean, it really does actually make sense when you start thinking through that lens. Yeah. A lot of Hitler's stuff just seems like complete madness until you actually...
It's so interesting to me because the only evidence of National Socialism having anything to do with socialism is that the party that the party that Hitler joined into was the National Socialists, and they were pushing socialist policies. Once he had a firm grip of it, he booted everybody out and used the momentum built up by that socialist party to do everything but actual socialism. And these guys are like, see, that's how socialism totally is. Yeah, absolutely. It's so bizarre. It's so bizarre. And it's exhausting. Are we going to move on past this? I want to hear more about woke. Can we hear more about woke?
Actually get the explanation that Tick gives you of National Socialism. You're like, oh yeah, no, everything Hitler does actually makes sense within this framework.
Yeah, he's harmonizing the race.
It's like the Gleichschaltung or whatever it is, the synthesizing of the economy.
Yeah, harmonization or something.
Yeah, like a lot of people at the time, as he writes just in his videos, took that and went to the New York Times and were like, oh, he's privatizing the companies. And it's like, bro, literally nationalizing them and giving them to party organizations. Yeah. There's no individual even owning these things, so...
Well, party members...
Okay, but again, if you're giving it over to the party, the government... How in any way does it have anything to do with socialist policies? This is so crazy. Oh my god.
Members were at the top of them, if that helps.
But it's still not privatization, because obviously it's within the state.
Yeah, I mean, what does...
Yeah, it's not privatization, it's not, because they took control of it from the companies that had it, and then they gave it to a very specific elite few of private citizens that were basically vassals of the leading political party to do exactly what they wanted them to do. But it's not privatization. Okay, sure.
What does privatization mean in a totalitarian state?
Doesn't even.
What does it mean? It means nothing.
That's right. That's a good way to put it. When they killed all the socialists, all that was left was the nationalists. Exactly. These guys will never argue that, though, because they are pro-nationalist. They are. I've seen Carl say that. I've seen Carl say that he is pro-nationalist. What's wrong with loving your country? Nationalism. Blah, 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 blah. Like, that's why they try and make this argument, why they desperately have to make this whole thing about socialist in any way is bad, because the bad part of the National Socialist movement is the thing that they like. It's so crazy.
And that's the thing. Like, he goes to the root definitions as well. Like, if you want to privatize something, like, an individual has to own the thing. That's the definition of something being private.
But also they
That's why a
have to
publicly
have.
traded company is not private.
But also they have to have property rights
Yeah.
in order to actually own it. And the Nazis, what was it? Not the Enabling Act. There was something. Like, I watched the video of this yesterday. One of the first acts that the Nazis put into place, just essentially not erased, but made private property conditional rather than a fundamental right.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well then they're not capitalists, are they?
It's just ridiculous. And the thing with the different forms of socialism, as he defines it incorrectly so, as in like it actually works to explain why they do things, you don't end up with confusion. Like if you believe the Marxist worldview, the National Socialists...
You see, if you enact a policy by which private property is no longer a right but conditional because of the decisions of a fascistic government, and that you have to make sure you obey the rules and conditions of the fascistic government in order to maintain your own private property, that's socialism. What? That's fascism. Like, that's so crazy. Quite the tightrope to walk, villainizing Nazis while you want to embody similar values. I know, but you know what? They get paid well enough to do it. Let's give it a little bit longer. I don't know how. I want them to get back to woke, but if they don't, then I'm going to be done.
It was just a brand, bro. Like, none of what they do makes any sense.
Yeah.
Because it's obviously just smear. It doesn't help you understand the world. Whereas if you actually here's someone trying to explain it to you without confusion, then you don't end up confused at the end of it. It's like, no, this makes perfect sense.
It's completely clear, and he's correct.
And, well, the difference between them then is just which dividing lines do you want to divide the whole world on. And this goes on to explain everything. I mean, with Wokism being the one that's like, oh, we'll do it on gender and race and class lines. And then, of course...
And sexuality and anything, and disability and anything else they choose to incorporate.
Or anything else that they see that there might be a systemic injustice inside of, you know? Like, if you paint this as just, well, whatever they're feeling like at the time, that's what they're going to try and change in society, then yes, of course, it sounds ridiculous. Of course. Now, you can disagree. If somebody says, I see this perceived injustice in society, and you disagree, you can disagree. It's okay. You can disagree with whatever the fuck you want. It's totally fine. But if they make a good cogent argument that you can't argue against, it might be something that you should at least consider. But if you dismiss their argument as, well, it's just whatever they feel like, I mean, that is intellectually lazy. It's so crazy.
It's the thing Kimberly Crenshaw brought to the left-wing debate, which is why we're doing it on one line, because, of course, we can be discriminated against on racial lines, we can be discriminated against on gender lines, on sexuality lines.
And we can form a coalition, such as, say, LGBT, if we bring all of these things together.
And
that was around way before any of this conversation started. What? It's more conspiracy building. It's way more conspiracy building. This is so crazy. I'm sorry. And these guys, like, the idea of them having a conversation about oppression is so funny to me. Like, Sargon is this posh D&D nerd that somebody blew enough hot air up his butt he decided to run for a political office and failed miserably while everybody threw fish at his face. And then Callum, the only oppression Callum's ever known is from the orcs of Mordor trying to stop him from getting the ring to Mount Doom, okay? I'm sorry. These guys are not in any way in a position to really have a good conceptual grasp of what people are talking about, especially when largely they're talking about things happening in America, not even in their own country, okay? For Carl, that's England, and for Callum, that's Middle-earth.
And it explains everything. Yeah. I mean, this is why I really like Tick, because his education is what I'm going to call it, has helped me actually understand the world. Because
he's a lot like Gandalf, you see? He's a lot liberal.
We go to the next one here.
It is education.
I mean, like race swapping.
Why didn't they fly to Mount Doom on the Eagles? What are you, a socialist? Huh? What, you think you could just, appropriate the Eagles for any old thing that you want? Would the Eagles be properly compensated? Or are you just going to seize the means of Eagles? You know, sounds like some Nazi stuff to me, okay? All right, thank you, sit down. Sit down.
Makes perfect sense once you understand what they're doing. Like, you're actually trying to increase, as they would put it, black and brown representation within media, which gives you cultural power. This is a particularly funny one. It's just as a side. This is a Ukrainian account. They deleted this now. They made a fake poster for a Prigozhin advert, the guy in charge of the Wagner Group, and they made a Netflix documentary where they changed his race. But this is so well known that Ukrainian S posters for the government are making S posts with this involvement. It's like,
okay, all right, whatever. Seize the wings. Seize the wings. That's good. I like that. Seize the wings. Is there anything else? I guess I got to go back to talking about Bethany Mandel. Let's try this for a minute, and if it's boring, we'll just move on. We'll just be done with this. Let's see.
if you actually define Wokism, they'll usually come up with some crap such as the following, which is one left-wing politician came up and said...
Ask any left-winger to define racism.
We've got the next link here. We can see the politicians trying to do it.
I will.
MAGA folks are unable to define woke. Why? Because here's the real definition: being respectful and not a jerk.
Sure. I mean, it's just as good of a definition as like a multi-paragraph manifesto of somebody intellectually jacking off to the reader. Like, look at how smart I am, which is all James Lindsay ever does. It's all these guys ever do. I like Ted Lieu. I think he's great, but I don't think that's a good term either. But it's, you know, at least briefer.
Oh, really?
Great.
How do you explain?
But here's a good thing. The other part to it. For example, a bunch of Americans tonight will go to sleep holding their spouse who is of the same sex. If that somehow fills you with rage, then you are not woke. That's fine by me. That's fine by me. I mean, it's still a crap definition for what we're trying to discuss. But like that, yeah, sure. It's the main thing that I think is somewhat important to really kind of grasp on is when somebody points at a thing and says that's woke. Ask them why that's a problem, because very rarely are they going to have a good reason. Very rarely. Very, very rarely. If somebody's talking about something as simple and stupid as like regular pop culture, April O'Neil is black again. Why is that a problem? Because it's changing the character. Technically, it's not. Well, I don't like it. Well, why don't you like it? Or if it's something like we want to take some tax dollars and put it into urban renewal and making sure that kids are going to be able to get free lunches and things like that and blah, blah, blah. Well, that's woke. Why? And why is that woke? And if it is woke, why is that a bad thing? And it inevitably will distill down to what their core motivation is. But you have to get them to answer the question. And that's one of the reasons why they build up this armor. It's this huge, giant collection of rubber bands that they've just been piling everything on over and over and over and over and over again to hide what they have a problem with. Because if you have so many layers covering up what your actual grievance is, then nobody will actually see it. You're just clogging up the gears by shrouding it in conspiracy and gobbledygook. That's what it's for. Disney does have some kind of reason for including a same-sex reference in all of their recent movies. So according to Ron DiNazzi, that's the woke agenda. Yeah, and it's one of those things of like, okay, so there is something that is gay in media. Okay? Why does that bother you? Why? It's so crazy. All I know is, all I can see every now and I constantly am bombarded with this. Everything's woke. I'm anti-woke. Be anti-woke. Blah 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 blah. All I hear is everything is cultural Marxism. Everything is woke, and you have to point it all out. It's just the right wing Sarkeesian form and function of painting a villain, and it's so lazy. And it's really funny, and it's really annoying. So, yeah, that's it. I'm not giving these guys any more attention. Goodbye, Carl. Goodbye, Carl's fleshlight.